Your soulmate is trying to reach you right now. There's something important they want you to know. Open now. My beloved child. Your soulmate is trying to reach you right now, and what they need to tell you is not something they can keep buried much longer. They have started a message more than once, erased it, rewritten it, then stared at your name without pressing send. But something changed today. Something happened that made silence feel more frightening than rejection. And the strange part? What they want to say is not simply, "I miss you." It goes much deeper than that. There is a truth they have been protecting because they believed revealing it could change the way you see them forever. Yet now they are beginning to realize that hiding it could cost them something even greater, you. Don't skip, because the reason they suddenly feel this urgency begins with a conversation they never expected to have. Earlier, someone asked your soulmate a question that stopped them cold. If this person disappeared from your life tomorrow, what would you regret never saying? For a moment, they had no answer. Then your face came into their mind, followed by every unfinished conversation, every moment they acted distant when they actually wanted to come closer, and every sentence they swallowed because fear told them there would always be another chance. That question followed them afterward. They tried to distract themselves, but they couldn't. And eventually they admitted something they had been avoiding for a long time: their feelings for you never became smaller. They became harder to hide. But there is another piece to this. Your soulmate has been carrying a specific regret connected to the last time things felt uncertain between you, and they believe you may have completely misunderstood what happened. What you saw as distance may not have been a lack of feeling at all. Your soulmate pulled back because they were afraid of making a promise they weren't ready to keep. They thought silence would protect you from disappointment. Instead, it created the very wound they were trying to prevent. Now they understand that you may have interpreted their hesitation as rejection, and that realization has shaken them. They want you to know they were never as unaffected as they appeared. There were nights they nearly reached out. Moments when one memory of you changed their entire mood. But tonight feels different, because they have finally decided that fear cannot keep making their choices. They are preparing to tell you what really happened, what they truly want, and why they waited this long. Stay till the end, because there is one final detail behind their silence, and once you hear it, everything about their behavior may suddenly make sense. The detail they have been hiding begins with a decision they made when they believed they were protecting your future. Your soulmate convinced themselves that stepping back would give you freedom, even though every part of them wanted to move closer. They watched you continue with your life while silently wondering whether they had already waited too long. Then something unexpected happened. They heard that you might finally be ready to close this chapter completely. Whether that information was accurate or misunderstood almost didn't matter, the possibility alone terrified them. Suddenly, all those carefully constructed excuses collapsed. What if you stopped waiting? What if someone else recognized your value while they were still fighting their fear? That was when your soulmate picked up their phone again, opened your conversation, and began typing something they had never dared to say before. But the first words weren't romantic. They were an apology. Your soulmate wanted to explain that their silence was never meant to punish you or make you question your worth. Behind that distance was a private struggle they didn't know how to describe without exposing how vulnerable they had become. They had imagined reaching you only after everything in their life was perfectly settled. But perfection never arrived. Instead, the distance grew, and with every passing day, speaking became harder. Now they understand something painfully simple. Waiting until everything feels safe could mean losing the person they were trying to become ready for. So they erased the carefully written explanation and replaced it with something shorter, something far more honest. Yet before sending it, another thought stopped their finger above the screen. Would you even believe them after everything that happened? That question is exactly why they are hesitating right now. They know words alone may not repair what silence damaged. They know you could ask, why should I trust this now? And strangely, they are finally prepared for that question. Because this time, your soulmate doesn't only want to confess how they feel, they want to reveal what they are willing to do differently. Something has already been set in motion behind the scenes, a choice that could prove whether their intentions are serious or simply emotional words spoken too late. Don't skip. The message they are trying to send you is only the beginning. Because before reaching out, your soulmate quietly changed one important part of their plans, and when you discover what they changed, you'll understand why they suddenly cannot afford to remain silent. The change they made was not impulsive, it was something they had been terrified to do for weeks. Your soulmate quietly removed an obligation that had been keeping them emotionally trapped, the very thing they once used as a reason to keep postponing you. They finally admitted that building a future around fear was costing them the connection they cared about most. And once that decision was made, something inside them shifted. They stopped asking, "What if this goes wrong?" and started asking a far more painful question, "What if I never try?" That is why reaching you suddenly feels urgent. They are no longer preparing for some imaginary perfect moment. They want to speak while there is still something between you worth saving. But there is one problem, they don't know what you have decided during their silence. Your soulmate has noticed something different about you lately, even from a distance. You seem less willing to chase answers. Less willing to remain inside uncertainty. And strangely, that change has made them realize exactly how much they took your presence for granted. Before, they assumed there would always be another opportunity to explain. Now they aren't so sure. They have imagined opening your conversation and discovering that you have emotionally moved beyond them, and that possibility has forced them to confront the truth they avoided. They never wanted a life where you became simply someone they used to know. So they drafted another message. This one began with a sentence they had never allowed themselves to write before: "Should have told you this when I still had the chance." But what came immediately afterward revealed something even deeper. They admitted that there was a specific moment when they realized their feelings for you had become impossible to dismiss. It wasn't during some dramatic argument or romantic encounter. It happened during an ordinary moment when something reminded them of you, and instinctively, you were the first person they wanted to tell. That frightened them because suddenly they understood, you had become connected to the small parts of their life, not just the intense ones. Their victories felt incomplete without sharing them with you. Their difficult days made them wonder what you would say. And now they want you to know exactly when that realization happened. Stay with this, because that memory involves something you once said to them, something you may have completely forgotten, but your soulmate remembers almost word for word. And what they did after remembering it is where this story takes an unexpected turn. What you once said to them sounded almost ordinary at the time. You don't have to have everything figured out to be honest with me. You may have forgotten those words, but your soulmate didn't. They remembered your expression, the calmness in your voice, and most of all, the fact that you weren't demanding perfection, you were asking for truth. That memory hit differently now because they finally understood what they had done. They spent all this time trying to become ready while ignoring the one thing you actually needed from them, honesty. So they returned to the unfinished message on their phone and stopped trying to make it beautiful. No carefully chosen explanation. No hiding behind complicated circumstances. They typed exactly what they felt. But just before sending it, they added one sentence that changed the entire meaning of the message. That sentence was, "There's something you never knew about the day I pulled away." Your soulmate knows this is the part that could finally answer the question you've carried for so long. Because that day wasn't random. Something happened only hours before their behavior toward you changed. They received information that made them believe getting closer to you could create consequences they weren't prepared to handle. Instead of bringing that fear to you, they made the decision alone. They became quieter. Their replies changed. Their warmth became guarded. And from your side, it probably looked painfully simple. They were losing interest. But privately, they were watching everything fall apart while convincing themselves that disappearing was somehow the responsible choice. Now they know it wasn't. And there is one person connected to that misunderstanding who recently resurfaced with information your soulmate never expected to hear. That person finally admitted that what your soulmate had been told was incomplete. One crucial detail had been left out, and hearing it changed everything. Suddenly, the reason your soulmate used to justify staying away no longer looked the same. Imagine realizing that months of hesitation may have been built around something you never fully understood. That is the emotion driving them toward you now. Not desperation. Not some passing loneliness. They want the truth between you before another day disappears. But they also know revealing everything could force them to admit how badly they handled the situation. Don't skip, because your soulmate is preparing to tell you who gave them that original information, and more importantly, what was missing from the story. And when that missing detail comes forward, you may finally understand why they are trying so urgently to reach you now. The person who gave them that information was someone your soulmate trusted enough not to question. They were told that you were preparing to move forward without them, that continuing to pursue this connection would only complicate your life, and that the kindest thing they could do was step aside. Your soulmate believed it because certain things seemed to support the story. Your silence looked like acceptance. Your independence looked like closure. So they convinced themselves that reaching out would be selfish. But recently, the same person admitted something important. You had never actually said you wanted your soulmate gone. That conclusion had been assumed for you. And when your soulmate heard that, their stomach dropped. How much time had been lost because they trusted someone else's interpretation instead of simply asking you? That revelation changed the message they were writing. Suddenly, they didn't want to send another vague confession that could leave you with more questions. They wanted to take responsibility. They typed that they should have come directly to you instead of allowing fear and outside opinions to decide what your connection meant. Then they paused over another sentence. one they almost deleted because it exposed too much. I kept hoping you would somehow know I still cared. Reading those words back made them realize how unfair that hope had been. How could you know what they refused to say? How could you understand a silence they never explained? For the first time, your soulmate stopped defending their choices to themselves. And that honesty led them toward a decision far bigger than sending a message. They decided that if they reach you, they won't ask you to forget what happened or pretend the distance never hurt. They want to answer your questions, even the uncomfortable ones. More importantly, they are prepared to hear your answer without controlling it. That scares them more than anything because they know you may not respond the way they hope. Still, remaining silent now feels worse. Something huge is waiting for you, because your soulmate has already prepared the exact truth they want to tell you if you answer. And hidden inside that truth is a confession they have never made to anyone. Not the person who advised them, not the people closest to them, not even themselves until recently. It explains why losing you frightened them long before they ever admitted they were falling for you. And that confession begins with one moment from your past together that they have never been able to forget. That unforgettable moment happened when your soulmate was going through something they barely spoke about, yet somehow you noticed the change in them. You didn't demand an explanation. You didn't pressure them to open up. You simply stayed present and treated them with the same warmth when they had very little warmth left for themselves. They remember looking at you and realizing that you were seeing beyond the version they showed everyone else. That frightened them more than they admitted. Because being understood meant becoming vulnerable, and vulnerability meant you suddenly had the power to matter deeply. From that moment forward, losing you stopped feeling like an ordinary possibility. It became something they quietly feared. And instead of admitting that fear, they did what felt safer at the time: they hid behind distance. Now your soulmate understands the painful contradiction. They pulled away because you mattered too much, only to make you believe you didn't matter enough. That is the confession they have struggled to put into words. They want to tell you, I wasn't distant because I felt nothing. I became distant because what I felt was becoming impossible to control. But they know that explanation cannot erase what you experienced. So they are preparing to say something else, something more mature than a dramatic promise. They want to acknowledge exactly where they failed you and ask whether there is still room for one honest conversation. No pressure. No pretending. Just the truth that should have been spoken much earlier. Yet something happened while they were preparing themselves for that conversation, and it made reaching you feel even more urgent. Your soulmate discovered that an opportunity connected to their future may require a major decision very soon. It could change their routine, their responsibilities, or even how easily the two of you can reconnect. And suddenly, the time they thought they had no longer feels unlimited. They don't want to make another life-changing choice while leaving you completely unaware of what is in their heart. That is why their message keeps returning to one question: can we talk before I decide? Stay with this, because the decision itself is not the biggest revelation. Your soulmate has already imagined two different futures depending on what happens next, and in one of them, they are willing to change something they once considered non-negotiable. What they are prepared to reconsider for you is exactly what they want you to know before they make their final choice. What they once considered non-negotiable was the direction they had planned for their own future. Your soulmate had convinced themselves that certain choices had already been made, where they would go, what they would prioritize, and how much space they could realistically give a relationship. But now, for the first time, they are questioning that entire plan. Not because they expect you to rescue them from it, but because they finally understand that a future can look perfect on paper and still feel painfully empty without the person who matters. They keep imagining themselves moving forward without ever telling you the truth, and every version of that future ends with the same question: why didn't I at least try? That question has become impossible to ignore. And tonight, they are closer than ever to doing something they once swore they wouldn't do. They are prepared to rearrange part of that future if an honest conversation with you reveals there is still something worth rebuilding. But there is a difference now. Your soulmate isn't planning to arrive with demands or dramatic promises. They know they cannot simply appear after a period of silence and expect you to trust everything immediately. They want to show consistency instead. To answer what they avoided. To listen when you explain what their distance did to you. And perhaps most importantly, they are finally ready to let you decide what happens next. That realization has humbled them because for so long, they believed controlling the distance would protect both of you. Now they understand that they never had the right to make that decision alone. Still, before they reach you, there is one last truth they need the courage to say clearly. That truth is simple, but it has taken them far too long to accept: they never truly wanted to leave you behind. Even when they stepped away, part of them kept looking backward. Every attempt to convince themselves that the connection was finished only made them notice how unfinished it actually felt. Now they want one real conversation before circumstances make that conversation harder to have. Their message is nearly ready. Their fear is still there, but it is no longer stronger than their need to be honest. And just when they thought they finally knew exactly what to say, something unexpected appeared on their phone, something connected directly to you. They stared at it for several seconds, completely frozen, because what they saw made them wonder whether you might have been feeling the same unfinished connection all along. And what they do next could change everything between you. What appeared on their phone was small enough that anyone else might have ignored it, but your soulmate couldn't. It was a reminder connected to you, a memory, an old conversation, something that brought them instantly back to a moment when the two of you still spoke without all this distance between you. They stared at it longer than they expected. Then they noticed something they had completely forgotten. Near the end of that old exchange, you had left the door open for honesty. You never demanded that they choose you. You simply made it clear that if something changed, you wanted the truth rather than silence. Reading that again hit them hard. Because suddenly they could see exactly where everything went wrong. You had given them an opening, and fear had convinced them to close it. Instead of putting the phone down this time, your soulmate returned to the message they had been rewriting all night. They removed the excuses. They deleted the complicated explanations. Then they wrote what they should have written from the beginning: I need to tell you the truth about why I disappeared, and I don't expect you to pretend it didn't hurt. Their hands actually hesitated after that sentence because it made everything real. If they sent it, there would be no hiding behind uncertainty anymore. You could answer. You could reject the conversation. Or you could finally ask the questions they have secretly rehearsed answering 100 times. But something surprising happened in that moment. instead of feeling trapped.